Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Lorraine Aguilar. We talked about a model for world peace, what helped her to find her voice, and the different versions of being accepted. I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, hello everyone, and hello Lorraine. Actually, Lorraine, how should I pronounce your name?
Lorraine.
Lorraine. Okay, so welcome, Lorraine. And for the people to show us a little bit where here means. Oh, and there I see. Now I got what I had the problem before. My screen was doing a little bit hard. So you see me. This is where I am in Brussels, not in Brussels, in Belgium, in Ghent. And let's move us a little bit around the world. We're going to the United States, and there we are at Seal Beach for you. This is where you are, if I'm correctly informed.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's my home.
And actually, I'm going to move this like this, and I'm going to hide this again. Oh, I said hide. Yes, so here you are again on the screen. And on my side, it's now 26 minutes after 6 in the evening. What's the time on your side?
9:20, it just turned 9:27 a.m.
So you see, we're not just miles and kilometers apart, but we're also a lot of time zones away. And that is, I think I'm in the future here. You're, and I think it's just the early morning on a Friday. Is that it? Or are you ahead of us?
Yeah, Friday
So,
morning.
my Friday is almost ended. That is one of the last things I will do tonight. But you're starting your day that way. And for the people that don't know you, could you give us a small introduction of yourself?
Sure. My my one-liner is I teach empathy to engineers, and and
Wow.
even though that gets a little laugh and it's intended to, it's actually true. I'm a
Mm.
nonviolent communication trainer, and most of what I do falls into two categories. Working with tech companies to help them build their communication skills, empathy-based, mindful communication skills using nonviolent communication. And then the other bucket of my work are doing offsites, which integrate nonviolent communication principles, but again, in the larger context of an offsite. Are we here for our well-being? Are we here for strategy? Are we here to see each other for the first time because we work remotely? And so that's what I do. I bring people together
Mm. And I
and
think
give
you
them
also
skills. Oh, go
wanted
ahead.
to add a little different introduction as well, if I remember.
Yes, I proposed a little avant-garde way of saying hello, and yeah, I'm going to bring back my fourth grader, Lorraine, little Lorraine.
Mm.
So I thought it'd be fun to make music.
And
Ah,
I had troubles with the screen, but yeah, you're here with the sound as well. So
uh,
thank you very much for that extra little bit introduction. And we saw just before your guitar behind you, and now you brought some real music. So that's an extra nice introduction. Um, and really like it because I find it incredible how many people we have in the agile space that actually are one way or another connected with music. And I think you talk about empathy. I think music brings us in a lot of emotions and a lot of empathy for each other. If it's dancing to our own music or different kind of playing music, whatever, I think it's a nice way of bringing something else about who you are. So thanks for that.
absolutely. And I see them as the same thing, really, is how do we
Mm.
connect beyond our differences? Music does that. Nonviolent communication does that. You know, there's a lot of things that do that, that just transcend, you know, all of the details and just get right to the heart of what brings us together.
Yeah, I agree there. When I was a lot younger, I used to be a DJ, okay? And one of the things I didn't do much, but one of the things I did as DJ, okay, uh, not much, but sometimes is at weddings, and it was one of the things I liked about playing at weddings was you actually make people from different ages, different things, dancing on the same thing. And it was always a kind of challenge. Can I make the grandmothers dance on, I don't know, grunge or whatever? And that was like a fun way. How can I make these people there connected for a party to celebrate somebody or two people's new lives? And can I bring them together in with music that they would probably never dance together on different kind of things? So I always found that very fascinating how you can actually indeed use music to connect people in different kind of ways. So
Exactly. I love that you were a DJ. What was your DJ name? Did you have a DJ name?
I didn't have any specific name at that moment, but it was mostly in a youth club. But I did do some at New Year's Eve for a few thousand people. So it was sometimes also very sometimes nice to have larger things, but also some of the how would I say, failures, like trying to put on music. And I do remember one of the last times I did on a New Year's Eve, a lot of people. I took over from another one, I don't know, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I took over, and it was always the same kind of music before. So I was first trying to put on the same thing, and then just like literally half a minute before the song went out, I was like, no, let's change completely music style. So I put in a new CD, I put play, I see the clock going on, I turn on the what is it, the thing to put the music on, I turn the other music off, completely silence. And I see like 2,000 people watching me, like, what the hell are you doing? I watch, I see everything is okay. I totally don't understand what's going on. What I forgot was that the song I was putting on, it starts with 2 seconds of silence. And then from there is a scream, somebody really screaming. It was a kind of grunge rock song, and somebody screaming from the top of the lungs, "Ruh!" and you literally could see then 2,000 people jumping up with that song, and everybody afterwards, great, that was daring, fantastic. And it was a complete mistake. I completely didn't realize it. So I went from completely failure to everybody loving it in half a second or a second.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that was a very emotional moment of doing it.
I love it.
um,
And go ahead.
And I tried to replicate it later at another party. It completely failed because then everybody knew, of course, what was going on. So it didn't work. So it's also a nice example of sometimes you have something that is happening out of mistake, but yeah, it doesn't make sense to try to replicate it because then people feel that it's less sincere. Uh,
Yeah, you
Anyway,
you
we
remind
jumped
me.
right in. Go ahead.
Actually, I love this theme because it's very relevant to what we're talking about. First of
Hmm.
all, what your story, Eve, tells me reminds me of the famous painting instructor. Is it Bob Foster? I forget, the guy with
Yeah,
public vision and the big afro. He used this term, happy accidents, or
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
happy. And that's what you're describing. And I love that we started with a DJ theme because it really embodies a lot of how I see my own work. Literally just a
Mm,
few days ago, I was celebrating, I just finished a big offsite up in the Bay Area for a client, and we were celebrating the offsite because it went incredibly well. And
mm,
and people, I was asked, like, how do you do what you do? Like, how do you get this job? You know, like, I have the best job in the world. And I said, my job is really like a DJ. If you give me
mm,
1 day of people together, 2 days of people together, the whole idea of a DJ is you meet them where they're at, whatever their energy level is. And same thing, if you're designing a training or an offsite, where are they? Are they skeptical? Are they enthusiastic? And then, like a good DJ, you gently invite them in, you don't force them in. And then at some point you get that pumping moment where everyone's like, yeah, get people out of their chairs, off their seats, high-fiving. And then similarly, like a DJ, you've
mm,
got the slow dance, right, for the old couples. And then again, designing moments where people can go deep, into introspection. And that's where my guitar usually comes in, the acoustic actually. Giving people really deep questions like what does wisdom want me to know? Things like that, where you can
Mm.
really reflect as I'm quietly playing Dust in the Wind on my guitar. So, so I really do think you and I have a lot in common. We're both DJs.
In a way, yeah, and I think you made me think immediately about a French woman that I like to work with, Oana Junko, who used to call herself, I think, an agile leadership DJ. She had different kind of things, but it seemed indeed it's about mixing the different kind of things. For me, it also, I remember that the late Jerry Weinberg once said, when I asked the question, what are you most proud of? His answer then in a written format was that he said that I didn't invent any methodology. And it made me realize that, for example, for me, I don't like to invent new things. I like to use the things that exist and mix them a little bit as like a DJ. I don't need to invent new methodologies. We have enough of them. But okay, like with customers, what do they need? Okay, let's bring what is in my toolbox and let's mix it to what they need. And indeed, as a DJ case, sometimes you change a little bit the speed of a song because it fits more the previous song and things like that. Just like as an organizational coach or changing things, we adapt our tools to what the audience needs at that moment. So that
Exactly.
is so I really like how we dive deep into that even before the questions, how we already see some connections and some things. Yeah, I really like that. It's that's indeed what I like about these kind of conversations, finding things that unite us, where we see things that we are. So let's jump into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah, I love this question because it really got me to reflect on my life.
Mm.
And and what I would say to that question is that on the surface, the biggest question I get asked about, who I am, what I do is, how did you make such a big career change, Lorraine? You used to be an engineer,
Mm.
and now you teach soft skills, basically. Like this is a big radical change. And I guess what people don't know, and that I got to appreciate through this question, is that if I look at my life, on the surface, it looks like a lot of radical changes. I used to be an engineer. I used to be a United Nations facilitator. I used to be many
Wow.
things. Yeah, yeah. And what I love about living long and living well is that patterns emerge, right? You live long enough and you see patterns emerge. And so I realized there was this beautiful pattern in my life that on the surface I've had all these disparate, diverse jobs. I was a resident assistant in the dorm. I was a camp counselor at many different camps, including, yes, orchestra camp.
Wow.
So camp counselor, UN facilitator, engineer, all these things, they look different. But actually, I realized with relish that I have been doing the same thing all my life, which is,
Mm.
oh, and as a musician, of course, point to guitar, everything I do is about bringing people together. And that wasn't even intentional. As I reflect on my life, there is this strong universal theme. As a musician, I is it okay if we do rated PG versus rated G comments on this?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. I just yesterday I was telling a friend, I said, for me, music is kind of like sex, like, it can be enjoyable if you're playing by yourself, but it's so much nicer when you're playing with other people,
Mm.
and sharing it. And so, I hope that's okay that I said
But
that.
I really like how you put that because I've just been interviewed and it's for research for a PhD around sexuality and how do you talk with parents and children. And so yeah I've I can openly talk about lots of these things, never on this show, but yeah, I do think indeed there is a lot of similarity about how you treat people with empathy, and even young children, about learning about lots of stuff. And I actually am convinced that it's much better to openly talk about a lot of that stuff than to hide it and to keep it completely out of the closet. That doesn't mean that I have to discuss all the details about my sex life with the people I'm working with, or even my children. But just like you say, the difference between, okay, um, doing something alone or doing together, there is a lot of similarities, and you need both. I'm convinced you need both, because learning about your own body is important also for when you and learning about what you prefer in working. Okay, I like to work alone because I can study, I can look at things. That also learns something for when I work together with other people. So that's really very comfortable, and learning the things. So that's so yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good.
And if I believe it or not, I haven't really feel like I fully answered your question. So if I may give you sort of
Yeah,
the
go ahead. Some
big
more.
punchline. So it's yeah, the sex part was just an anecdote, but the real answer to your question is I realized that I've been doing the same thing all my life, and that's the biggest thing that might surprise people, because on the surface
Mm.
it looks like I've had many jobs, but if you go just a little below the surface, it's all the same job. And job is a small word. It's my calling. It's I realize that I live, and I've always lived, for bringing people together for something greater. So whether it's as a musician, playing for a wedding or playing at a jam session or a concert, elevating the moment. Whether I'm designing an offsite for a software company, it's not just how do we achieve our objectives. My little meditation is, may I actually I channel my strict Catholic upbringing. Even though my current spirituality is much wider, but I still remember the song I learned as a little girl. Make me a channel of your peace, and that's what I realize that's what I
Mm.
live for. Whether it's facilitating an offsite, doing a training, playing music with people. When I was an RA in the dorm, resident assistant in the dormitories, as a camp counselor, it's how do we bring people together for something elevated? And that's it.
And
It doesn't matter what form that takes. I realize that that's what I live for, and that's who I've always
and
been.
it's really always that channeling the peace in one way or another. So that sentence that you just sung, that's really is what a lot of these things that you talked about could be considered. uh, because, well, if you talk about what you just did before, bringing people together, yeah, sometimes people, when we, especially when we work with nonviolent communication, there is sometimes not enough peace, but you make sure that people find peace, or most of the time, I assume that when things are done, that there is much more peace, even if it means we have to say what is not at peace with ourselves or in the thing. But having the option to talk about the negative part brings more peace in the end.
Absolutely. Yes,
That's
because in I can only speak from my own experience, but I agree with what you're saying in that what gives me peace is less how the other person responds and more
mm,
did I show up in a way that's in integrity with who I am. So did I have
that's
the
really
right
nice indeed. The peace is, if am I at peace with, is my outer and my inner the same? Basically, that's it. Do I present myself as what I feel internally? Because of course I might be that's a very, I think that's a very important thing, because sometimes I've seen people that yeah, they present themselves as very peaceful, where actually they're boiling inside, and that's never going to end well for themselves or for the relationship or whatever. But that's we, the more we are in sync with ourselves outside and inside, that but of course when we first, how would I say it? When the first time I show that difference to the world, people might realize, hey, little, wait a minute. And so that can create less peace in the relationship, but in the end, it will bring more peace again. So
Yeah.
that's very, very nice of presenting. And if and again, you don't have to answer too much if that goes too deeper, but you talked a little bit about the Catholic upbringing, is that a lot is did that also have a big impact on not just the song but everything that was there in how you work? Because officially, and I don't want to go too much into detail, but officially the whole idea about that religion is about, okay, we want to see people as they are and whatever. It's used a lot in negative ways, I would say, sometimes say to say, to you don't act according to what I call normal, so then we judge people. But in the original scripture, I don't know how to say it, it's much more about accepting people. Did that have an influence, that idea there, in how you react now?
You know, boy, this could be its own podcast because there's so much I learned from a Catholic upbringing, and it's not just Catholic. I mean, my family,
Mm.
all four of my grandparents came from Mexico, so I like to believe that Mexican Catholic is like extra Catholic. You know, like there's a whole other layer
Mm.
of culture that goes with that. And what I would say that the biggest gift, and yet it was a painful one, is realizing that the light, if you want to call it the light of love, the light of God, whatever, can come through the cracks in the vessel. And that was my experience
Mm.
of the Catholic Church. And that's also my experience of my Catholic family. The greatest influence, to your question, is the most significant influence of being raised in a Catholic family was that I'm a little queer girl that grew up in a
Mm.
Catholic family. And so for me to be queer and in a family that is very conservative Catholic, and those who left Catholicism went to right-wing evangelism. So these are the people I love, and these are the people who love me. And yet, spiritually, politically, we have very different ideologies and values. And so for me, this is the model of world peace, right? Is can we love
Mm.
each other across our differences? Can
So yeah,
I
that's a little
to
bit
just
what I was, yeah, what I
so
wanted to talk about. Indeed,
yeah,
Catholicism officially it's about love, but a lot of people are using it or abusing it in a way to say you're not just like us, and then they you're no longer loved. What I hear is that in your family, at least for now, maybe there was a different path, but at least for now, people do accept you as you are, even if they know you're different. Is that a correct thing that I heard?
yes and no. I mean, am
Mm.
I loved, accepted, cherished? Will they care for me if I get sick? All that stuff? Absolutely, yes. If I were to get married to a woman and have a ceremony, would they attend? Probably not.
Mm.
So, so this is
So
and
there is a limit to that love in a way.
yeah,
But but as sad as this, at the same time, it's already a lot better than sometimes it happens. Sometimes people completely reject that other person once they know it, and so they have already took a step further. That's what I'm hearing.
exactly.
But
And
it's
rather
still
than
hard.
oh, go ahead.
And
It's easy for me to turn this into a therapy session. And the main thing that I want to say about this is it's been a tremendous gift for me in terms of exercising my own compassion, which is not easy. And it's something I'm
Mm.
still learning in this context. This is my growth area. And one of the things that makes it easy is I remember what it was like to be a flute player in the Sunday math folk masses, every Sunday. And to feel that elation, that as a young girl, to feel in the context of a church that no longer is aligned with all of the way I experience God. But I remember the elation and the deep connection to God. I remember riding my bike to go to the 6:30 a.m. mass before high school, to have that sacred moment of connection with something
Mm.
divine. And so even though there's a lot I could easily criticize about that experience, and there's certainly a lot of pain I could tell you about that I experienced through it, I also remember the beauty. And I think that's a model. I mean, the church is a model for people. We have pain, we have beauty. We have hypocrisies. We have jewels. Every person. One of my mentors, early mentors in leadership development. Okay, now I'm going to get a little naughty, little salty with my language. She says, "We're all angels with assholes," and I think that's true of every institution, of every person. And
Mm.
how do we nudge towards the angel? It's-
But yeah, I think I read it somewhere in a similar way, with maybe less nicer ways of words, and said everybody has some ethic and some yeah, somewhere where things are hidden in ways, and if you think you don't, well, you don't know enough about yourself, because there's always things that we don't and typically, well, this is what I learned as a parent. Of course, I see things that my children do that make me remind of, okay, this is maybe the negative part of myself, and unfortunately, I yeah, then it jumps out very quickly, and you realize that, okay, I might get annoyed or mad or whatever, but it's the part of the annoyance is the fact that I recognize that this is also a part of me, and a part that I might not like. Um, and what I'm hearing, and I'm amazed at how you tell this story, because it's very clear that it wasn't an easy path, that there was a lot of pain, and still you tell it with so much compassion, with so much empathy for that whole institution, for the people who are, yeah, they accepted you apart, not completely, so there is still some pain, there is still some things that are not the way you wanted to do or to have it, and at the same time you also learned all these lessons, and you actually use it, or that's at least what I'm hearing, also use it for when you need to have empathy for other people, for other things, when you're working with what, yeah, with everything that you're doing, with your nonviolent communication. This is, I think, that is also part of it, because with nonviolent communication, we're discussing with people, then sometimes they say stuff, or there is things happening that we don't like, but we want to act from trying to understand it, and trying to find ways to connect one way or another. And I'm hearing that, maybe I'm reading too much, but I'm kind of hearing that you learn so much out of that whole experience, and you use it really as a lesson for whatever you bring to the world.
oh,
Is that the correct?
absolutely. That that's so true. I mean, this is why there are many, there are many nonviolent communication trainers, but we're all different because we
Mm,
everything we do, and that's true not just for nonviolent communication. I would say for any profession. I mean, every musician, two people could play the same song, and it'll come out differently based on what's coming up through us. And this is what I'd like to say. And if I were to connect the dots between the conservative upbringing and nonviolent communication in my life today, is it helped me find a voice.
mm,
And I was, as a young child and growing up, and I think a lot of women in particular can relate to this. Is it's harder. I found it hard to get angry as a kid, and
mm.
if I was angry about something, I had to stuff it. And if I expressed it, which was usually in a childlike way, I would be punished for it. So I learned how to
Because
stuff
that not
anger.
was not ladylike. That was not for a girl to act that way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not only ladylike, but if in the power structures of you're a
Hmm.
parent child, or but whether I'm a child or a woman in a man's world, or there are some expectations for us to be nice at all
Yeah, much
costs.
more on girls than on boys, because when boys,
I think so. Societal wise, it's easier. If a man gets angry, it could carry gravitas if it's done well. If a woman gets angry, it's much easier to say, "Oh, what a bitch." But this is what I love about nonviolent communication, and that's a great generalization. I'm sure there's lots of exceptions, but I found myself just stuffing my voice because I didn't know how to say it in a way that wouldn't come off as cruel or mean. And so learning how to be honest, and how to be kindly honest in a way that's not blaming or pointing the finger. Like, here's a quick example. Instead of saying, Eve, you're such a control freak, right? Here's something small, right? Like you're such a control freak, right? That can be defensive, etc. But instead, just learning how to say, you know what, I really want more freedom in my work. It's a lot easier to say that. Or hey, Eve, you dominated the conversation, right? If I say, this is my voice, I want to speak, Eve, you dominated the conversation, right? That would just explode, right? Even though I'm being honest. But if I say, look, I really wanted to say something, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Right. So this is what I love about non-violent communication, learning to come from a place of ownership, not you, but I, like, hey, I wanted to say something too, but I respect you so much, I didn't want to interrupt. This isn't true. This is a hypothetical. I love our flow. And so
Well,
for
but
me,
it's
it's magic. Go ahead.
yeah, the I language I find indeed so powerful and I've used that example a lot as in retrospectives. Indeed, if we can find ways to say it from ourselves, not like you say you controlled it or you did this or you did that. No, I couldn't do my part because of what happened, and it could be you, it could be someone else, it could be that maybe it's in our interaction of something that happened that blocked me from doing the thing I wanted to do. It could be some in many different ways, and that is really where I language shows much more. And I like the way you put it. I never saw it as taking responsibility, but that's indeed what it is. It shows what I want to do, where my desire is, and then that helps so much. And
And that's huge. You hit on probably the biggest misconception and myth about empathy, which is what a lot of people get wrong, and then they suffer for it, which is thinking that if I am, empathetic, that I'm just going, because I understand you had a bad childhood, I'm going to let you, create harm, right? But it really is about the accountability. Empathy is nothing with the accountability piece. And this is what people don't, it's so enlightening when you finally get it. Like you said, it's not just I language because it's easier for you to hear. It's I language because I'm accepting responsibility for my experience. So for example, if I say, Eve, you're a lousy manager or supervisor or whatever, right? Yeah. That's my judgment of you, right? But if I just say, I don't work well under your leadership, or that's a terrible restaurant versus I don't like the food there, it's really subtle. And yet it's the difference between being a victim of someone else and taking responsibility that my experience was not a good one. Maybe it was an anomaly. Maybe other people might flourish under your leadership. Maybe that restaurant makes other food that's wonderful, and maybe not. But at least now I can make an informed choice instead of a good, bad judgment of people.
Yeah,
and so ownership is key.
thank you, because it also turns a light on the communication, on a discussion. No, not even a discussion. A conversation. That's the word I was looking for. That I had today that was not flowing well, and because of what you just said, I realize where I was. It actually gives me words for what I was trying to say. So I already know what to do on Monday. So thank you very much on having a different kind of conversation. Because I don't want to dwell on, especially not talk behind the back of another person. But in this particular case, I was trying to explain something and I couldn't really. And now I realize that, I wasn't helping, because indeed, I think the I language would have helped a lot more. And it also explains why I shouldn't have that conversation with someone else, because I was helping out, and actually it might made things worse because I didn't know enough about the situation to use the I language. So it really brings a lot of things to me. So thank you very much. That immediately brought them, and it's incredible. You said right from the start for this question, like, okay, this is going to be a deep one, but I didn't realize how deep we were going to go into. This is just one question, and we've already been talking for a very long time. But it's very deep in all kind of directions. So it's very nice to see where we go there. So I want to go to that next question. If you would not have been doing what you've been doing now, what would have become of you? And you actually told already a little bit about the different things that you've done in your life. But for example, a question that I typically, or that I sometimes add to it, is that was there something that you were destined to become when you were a little girl or somewhere else in your life?
Yeah, the short answer is I am exactly what I was always meant to be, which is someone who brings people together and
Mm,
creates someone who creates experiences, whether they're work experiences, musical experiences, etc., for a higher purpose. I would put a little twist on that question because I saw an earlier
mm,
version is if I was not in IT, what would I be
right.
then? And see, even though I don't consider myself an IT professional, I serve the IT community. Uh, I will answer your question by saying if I didn't discover the IT community, I would not have discovered Agile. And for me,
Mm,
Agile was a game changer and a life changer and completely aligned with the principles of nonviolent communication. So Agile made me a better person, and I still apply those principles in how I live.
wow, that's a very nice way of again turning it around one way or another. But yes, I changed it from IT to more general because sometimes I interviewed people who were not exactly into IT, but you come again to the right thing about, okay, it's because of agile that you we recognize some of these things. um, and I can imagine that, yeah, you were the did I hear it correctly that you are working as a non-violent communicator, as a trainer and everything before you met agile, or how did what's the
That's
order there?
correct. That is correct. I remember the first time I ever presented at an Agile conference. It was the Southern California Agile Open many years ago. And when I announced my session, literally the entire room laughed at me when I said nonviolent communication. And so this was way back in the day when a lot of people didn't know about it. And I
Mm.
remember being so surprised. And I asked, like, why are you laughing? And someone shouted from the back of the room, they're like, we're engineers. Do you really think we're violent? But I just love that. It just
Interesting.
by surprise. And by the way, the name nonviolent communication is such a liability because it's not about de-escalation or
Mhm.
physical violence, even though it can certainly influence that. It's more about the internal game, the mindfulness, what's going on
Mm.
inside of me even before I say something. Um, and so, and of course, there's more to it than that, but it's more about mindful communication skills, is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I think sometimes, yeah, some things are, when it's originally invented, people put up a name that might not always fit completely, and then it sticks. I think in agile we have a lot of examples where that name might help. I gave a session today about extreme programming, and which is a way in technical stuff, and that I'm sure that that name helped to create much more buzz around it, but at the same time it also created a lot of misunderstandings about it. That, yeah, and I'm not sure if that was better or not, because without it, maybe I would not have known it. But at the same time, it creates also kind of different kind of expectations. And I can see the same thing with, yeah, having violence in a name that people might not realize that. And maybe just because you briefly mentioned in the beginning, you worked for the United Nations. Was that also where you worked as with nonviolent communication, or did you learn it there, or how could I?
I wish I had known it at the time. Nonviolent communication came later.
Hmm.
Um, I lived in Thailand for 5 years, and that's a lot of people didn't know that. In the same way that Geneva is the global hub for the UN, Bangkok is the UN hub for all of Asia and the Pacific. And by then, I'd had
Ah,
yeah, exactly. And so it was a great spot because if there was a program in Sri Lanka or Cambodia or there will be an office, or if there's a conference or something, that would be in the Bangkok area. But I traveled all over Asia facilitating, believe it or not, a lot of leadership and staff retreats, as well as summit meetings, conferences, things like that.
but not
But I
with, because I made the assumption when people talked to me about you and about working for the United Nations and working with NDC, I always made the connection between the two, and there is actually no connection.
Well,
There is a
there's a little
connection.
overlap. I mean, during the years that I was in Asia, I did not know about nonviolent communication. But when I moved back to California, I was hired to facilitate a multi-day retreat for the United Nations Development Program. Had a new global director of human resources, and so they were flying in people from different offices in different countries that were the HR leaders there to come. So we had like 70 people at this retreat. And so by then I did know some nonviolent communication, and we used it in terms of deeper listening skills, because they hired me because they called it, we have retreat fatigue. You know, we've had so many retreats, we're getting jaded, right? So how do we, and also they had an employee survey where they were getting certain results coming up over and over again. So retreat fatigue and the same things happening, even though we keep doing things. So how do you break that cycle?
Wait, did I hear that they organized retreat because you had retreat fatigue? Is that a little bit what I hear? Or?
Well, they have retreats as a part of, this is what I loved about the UN, at least the organizations that I worked with, which is they have a strong retreat culture. Every year, it's, you know, many of the offices, especially in the United Nations Development Program, will just have an annual retrospective, essentially. So that is part of their culture, which I loved and kept me happily busy. You know? But so it is, to your question, they didn't have a retreat because they were fatigued. They have a retreat because that's part of their culture, is to do regular, not only retrospectives, but in this case, a kickstart to a new chapter of a new serious leader. But they hired me to because of the fatigue. We want something fresh. And so nonviolent communication was
someone who knows it, but at the same time you were no longer with them. So yeah, you were a little bit in and out at the same time.
But actually, in a way, it was the same, because I was never an employee of the UN. I was always a consultant. So it was my own business, but I was the go-to facilitator. So if I walked in the UN building in Bangkok, you know, after a while, I could guarantee that I'd get a hug from someone there, just because I was in that building all the time. You know? So, but it was still as my own business. But I was the contracted facilitator. They tend to contract that job out rather than use their own.
And what I also hear is, well, you say it's different, but at the same time, because you're so interested in this, I think the different things link together as well. You being the person who you are, this is why they hired you, and you being the person who you are, this is why you went into nonviolent communication at some point, I think.
Yeah. Yes, they did not ask for. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think at that level there is a link as well, I think. Okay, let's move to the third question, because I feel like we can keep going on, and like you say, I have a lot of different podcasts and things. What do you consider your biggest challenge right now, and why is it a good thing? And at least the biggest challenge that, of course, you want to talk openly on the internet, because sometimes people tell me afterwards, I have a bigger one, but yeah, let's not put that out. So what is the biggest challenge you want to talk about here?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge that's right in front of me right now is it's not just a professional challenge, it's actually a personal challenge as well. It's learning how to receive help and ask for help, because I'm at a juncture in my life and in my life's mission where I can't do it alone. You know, it's time to scale, and I cannot scale by myself. And just because I can do something and I'm smart enough to figure something out doesn't mean I'm the best person for that job. And so learning how to receive help and ask for help. And the challenge for that for me is it's a vulnerability thing. I realize, like, well, what if I hire someone who's not competent? Or what if I, you know, pour all my money down a channel that's not the best channel, you know? So, or you know, when you don't, how can I put it? It's hard to hire. Or simple example, I have a brand new website that is on a holding pattern, and I need someone who knows search engine optimization. Well, there's a million options, right? And people and costs. And so how do I resist the analysis paralysis and just start with something. It's really about, how do I put agile integrity into my life, right? How do I just start? And if there's failures early, make sure there's small risks so that I can course correct or find a different supplier or something. So just learning how to have that vulnerability of reaching out and realizing there's certain things I can't do alone. That is an act of self-generosity and vulnerability that I'm stretching into right now.
Well, and especially when you say, what I hear, there's so many different things, and of course you probably can all do these small little things yourself, but it's the total package that is not possible anymore, and not at the scale that you want to go. That's what I'm hearing. You want to scale, and yeah, I see so many business, because it's a little bit, I would say, the difference between working in your business and on your business. Do you want to keep doing all the work, or having someone who can help out and you can think about the scaling version or the other versions of it? And then asking for help, I see so much people struggling with that. And yeah, I don't know how much the Catholicism is playing into that, but I've seen people also thinking like, yeah, but you have to do it, you have to take responsibility. And there is also the part where, hey, maybe I can't do it, maybe I'm not the best person, so maybe there is that part I see also in society, that asking for help is not the easiest part to do. And sometimes we're good in one part of our life, and because maybe you're really good at asking for help, I don't know, in your private life or in the kitchen or in whatever else, and then you need to, in your business, is like, oh damn it, I need to learn it again, or at a different level. That's what I reckon.
Exactly.
And so that second part, why is that a good thing for you?
The second part, why is that a
The
good thing?
second part of the question, there is two parts of that question. So what is your biggest challenge? But why is that challenge a good thing for you? Because for me, there is always something good about things. So is there a good part about that challenge?
Yeah, I realize it's about being willing to be vulnerable.
Mm.
I think there's part of me that has an irrational fear that maybe someone might, take advantage of me, or that I might fail in a way that I might not be able to recover from. Um, I Yeah, I think it's the vulnerability of trusting people with my work, which is like my baby. It's like,
Mm.
here's my precious child, like, and with my money, which is, limited. Do I want to spend that well? And and so I think there's just a vulnerability. Like, think of a parent. Are you really ready for that nanny? Do you trust them? Are they, like something so precious? And so, I think I've treated things as too precious. I want to be
Mm.
more in integrity. I mean, I live my life promoting agile principles and empowering people to be better collaborators. And yet I've been working so much in an ivory tower, it's time for me to collaborate more. And so I see that as me being more in integrity of actually practicing what I preach.
I really like that one, and especially the example you give us as a nanny, and that's like, yeah, I still this is brings a completely different kind of topic, but there's it was not the first. Luckily, it was not the first time, but I think it's, I don't know, the 10th time or so that we had a babysitter coming to it. And this was for coincidence. This was our our main babysitter couldn't do it. And so her brother came over. I think her brother or sister, I don't know anymore. But the first thing that we heard that evening was, oh, so little. And I was like, already, okay, this is, we had, I think it was child number 3, so indeed by that time we were used to having a babysitter, so it's probably not 10th but 50th time or whatever, but the first reaction of the babysitter was like, okay, such a little baby, because indeed in the first child you wait a couple of months before you're ready. After a couple of children, it's like, okay, now we can do it faster. We know we need to have some time off. We go, I don't know what we did, to the movie or whatever. But the first thing you hear is like, oh, so little. That really brings in all the bells in my head. Like, okay, is this babysitter ready? How can it work? Of course, no problems at all. But that that image right away is like, okay, is this the right moment to do that? Yeah, that I immediately had that thing. Is like you say, it's you do something, you ask for help, and even while asking, you're still in doubt. Is it not too early? Is it the right person? All that kind of things. That is. But like you say, if we're living according to agile principles, all of us, well, I think all of us, we recognize that you keep finding new principles and new ways where you see, oh, this is where that principle applies as well, and how do I do it? And okay, if I want to live according these, I have to, or I don't have to, or want to. It's somewhere in between. Go for that next step. But it's not
Exactly.
because we know that that's the next step that it's easy. That's what I'm hearing as well. It's a
Yeah.
challenge.
Well, I'm grateful for this conversation because I'm actually getting something from it that I'm finding
Mm,
encouraging, which is um, you're reminding me of agile is a tremendous comfort in this context. This challenge, the reason I kind of freeze and analysis paralysis, because I feel like it needs to be perfect. I need to interview everyone and get it
mm,
right, and and there can be no failure. It's like, oh, that's right. Remember agile. Maybe I can find a way to start small with someone, and if it looks like not a good fit, it's easy to let them go. And so, the idea of small little nuggets of work with someone, so that if the inevitable failures come, because obviously 100% of who we hire is not are always going to be the perfect fit. So just accepting that, but doing it in small chunks so that it's an easy course correct.
yeah, it's the smaller steps, it's the smaller things, it's finding. I remember one of the first times I worked as what I would call then later agile coach. That person was also not sure. It was a very small company. I've never done it before. I thought I could do it, but I was also not sure about that company. Will they be able to pay me, because this is a very small company? So we agreed on I work for 1 week. I think actually the first time was like, I do 1 day of work. If you're happy, I do 1 week, then 1 month, and 3 months, and then it kept going. And it really helped both of us, both the company and me, to feel like, yes, this is actually what I want to do. You're happy with the result. I know you can pay me. There was a lot of things that were very unsure in that beginning from both sides. Also for myself, am I able to do that? A little bit what I'm hearing is that I give it out to someone, but am I ready to let it go and to give my baby or to give my project to someone else? Can I explain it in a way? Do I, well, blah, 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 all that distance? Let's find the small steps there. So thanks for sharing also that vulnerability and how hard that process is, because um, I think when we're working with people, when I work with other people, sometimes they say, "Yeah, but Eve, for you it's easy because you've been doing that for 20 years." No, there are still things that after so many years are still hard. Like you give that nice example about, okay, now you have to do it in your own company for yourself, and where do you go? And this is your own money, so you know that if you make a wrong choice or too big a commitment, there might be or there will be consequences for you. So how can you minimize all of that? So thanks for sharing that. That's really very, very deep on where that goes. And actually, what this for me, this conversation flows indeed very into that direction. You're a very passionate person. You talk about it. We go very deep in all these kind of things. So I feel that passion. I feel that drive. Do you know what drives you? Where that drive is coming from? Originally, you already talked a little bit about that catalyticism, but is there very much more where you learned where that drive is coming from?
Um, I'd say that the drive for me is just happiness. The more I do this work that brings people together, the more, I feel like, yeah, like, "Rah!" and that's why I love my work. I feel like I mean, look at the guitar. I mean, I really like living like a rock star. I mean,
Mm,
last week there was a big offsite for a large tech company, and it's like it's like a concert, right? Like you prepare, you get the program, what's the set list, what are the right songs that are, but not songs. These are actually activities and conversations and, idea sharing, but as a metaphor, how do we, create this thing? And then you build up to it, and then you do it and you just rock it. And then when it's done, it's like, yay. And as a matter of fact, we even had a little jam session afterwards because they know I'm a musician and they've been asking for music every year each time that we do this. So each time more musicians join me, and we had a big happy hour on their campus, and they had a jam session. And so this is how I like to live. And this is the joy when we say what drives me. When I create an experience for someone, or for a group of people, and then to celebrate that together, it's like, yes, it's that joy of, and it doesn't always have to be rah-rah. It could be something deeply painful or a conflict, and that creates a space to grieve. One of my favorite testimonials is from an agilist at the Federal Reserve Bank, and I can say this because this was on my LinkedIn. Right after the COVID lockdowns, I was asked to do a workshop on resilience for, I think, over 100 of their IT folks. And they were going through some really painful changes as an organization, including layoffs. And so this wasn't just like, yay, rah, rah, let's have fun. This was, creating room for them to grieve. And this was even online, and yet still creating space for them to deeply connect with each other and to realize that this might be their way of saying goodbye, or realizing that they're facing an unprecedented challenge with each other. And there were actually tears. I mean, imagine that. I mean, over 100 people on Zoom. It helped us playing guitar a little. But so it's, not to say, when I say joy, it doesn't mean cheerleader all the time, but it means bringing something of beauty to whatever it is.
And what I like about, I want to go back also a little bit to what you said about living the rock star life. I think when people are very young, they think about rock star life. They think more about the partying afterwards and throwing the televisions out the door. But how you out the window, the way you presented this is so much the real rock star life. Like, you prepare, you rehearse, you do everything, you do play that concert. That is the main part about being a rock star. You get applauded, you get, I don't know how many people, and there might be extracurricular activities, but the real thing about the rock star life is doing that preparation and doing the concert, because without these things, nothing else matters. There is nothing else in that whole thing. And I think that is so crucial about sometimes people like, yeah, we want rockstar developers and whatever, and usually what that means is not the good parts about it. Where when you explain the rockstar life, this is not about taking drugs or doing whatever other strange things. This is about actually preparing the work and doing some together with an audience. And that is, and like you say so nicely, I've had indeed people go to concerts and being in a very emotional state, and yeah, getting to grief, getting to other painful things, because that music brings them so close to whatever. And that is what that important is. It's not just about dancing and everything. It's about bringing the emotion that is there already in the people. And that comes out in concerts, and that comes out in how you do your work. That's what I'm hearing.
That's
And
so true. That's absolutely true, that the concert itself, or the workshop, or the offsite itself, is a fraction of the time spent preparing. So it's, I mean, I think of it also like an architect, right? Let's sit and talk. What is your dream home? What is your dream way of working? And let's create an experience that's actually going to create the space for that to happen. And so the event is the build itself. It's the house, it's the construction. But the magic is in the architecture. What is the design? What is the blueprint of something that's going to create exactly the kind of environment you want for magic to happen?
Yeah, and I think many people, when we see a big rock group, pop group, whatever, we see just the hour, but we don't know all the practices. We don't know all the meetings that happen. if I see these days the stages that a U2 or Rolling Stones take with them, I just imagine how many hours and hours of meeting discussing how the stage should look, and there is not just 5 people on stage, but there is 200, because people are doing the lightning, and you have all that extracurricular thing there, and it's you basically, whoever is the singer, who has the lead of the band, he's has to orchestrate hundreds of people, and of course there is a lot of rehearsal, and it might mean that it's a little bit less freedom than if you're with just the 5 of you on stage in a small bar. But that doesn't mean that there is no freedom, and that doesn't mean that it's not fun. It's just different, and different kind of styles might demand different kind of preparations. That's also thing, and I think, that's what I hear also, is that if you've done so many of these things, you know, you have what we call your miles on your teller, or your miles on your car, so you know how to do a lot of that stuff. And so probably you will be able, if I just bring you in and say, okay, we're having a meeting and we have things like that, nonviolent communication, and you do a retro, you probably will be able to do a lot of that. And people think, you see, there's no preparation. Well, we forget about the 20 years, or the so many years that you've been doing that. So that's also all been in preparation for that one meeting that you'll have next week. So that's
Absolutely. And if I could share a very strong opinion that goes against what a lot of modern day facilitation training teaches, um, I have a strong opinion that a good agenda facilitates itself. A
mm,
great plan, a great plan that's really designed in collaboration with the client, it will facilitate itself. If I get sick and I can hand it to someone else, it will still be wonderful because it's in the design. And so when I see a lot of basic facilitation training, it really, it's almost the opposite. It's like, well, what do you do if someone is talking too much, and how do you silence the talkers, and how do you bring out the quiet people, and which I'm completely against, because that's controlling people, right? um, and how, what do you do if someone acts out, and how do you keep track of all the conversations as a facilitator? If you're working at that level, I'd say you're not working
in
optimally.
micromanagement.
Exactly. If someone is quiet, there's a reason they're quiet. Maybe it's not safe. So your job is not to force them to speak. Your job is to create the safety that if they do have something to say, they can move into that. And if someone has a tendency to speak a lot and lose track of time, or other people who might want to have cues saying, I'd like to speak too, well, then again, a good design um, can easily put guardrails on that, where that person doesn't feel embarrassed because you don't need to interrupt them, right? Something as
Mm.
simple as, um, and who would like to say something in 2 sentences or less? Something that simple, right? And so I am such a big fan of just a smart design, rather than the facilitator as like God and ninja, where you have to be ready for anything. It's actually, if you design well, there are very few surprises.
Yeah, I would. I agree. At the same time, I think there's probably less surprises for you, but I can imagine that if there's a less experienced facilitator, that he or she might not see the way you've designed it, and might. So when people take over, they might not realize some of the value in some of the things you've designed it, because indeed, like you
Oh,
say, some of the sentences that you say is really like, okay, that's what I've noticed, for example, that the 2 sentences, the first person that will speak up will use 5 sentences, and that and that's okay if it stays with 5 sentences, because if you say one word, people will use 1 sentence, and that's okay. But if I then say, well, okay, it's 1 sentence, but that's fine, that might still contain, if I don't say anything about it, the last person talks for 3 hours if I don't pay attention. So again, we need to work with that, I think. But like you say, it's really in the design. I've realized for myself as facilitator that I do a lot of that in the preparation, but I also need to work with my co-facilitators to explain on some of the things that I don't always know why I do it, because I've been doing it and I've learned it, and that's, I find that the hard part about what's how do I explain why I do what I do, because that is, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know yet because I haven't gotten to that level. I said that as a
Mm,
hypothetical, but I have yet to hand off my work to another person.
mm,
And yet that is the scaling we're talking about, is I've finally
I
polished so many little nuggets. I have so many wonderful shareable activities that I've both created as well as taken other activities that have been in existence and refined them. A lot of traditional nonviolent communication activities I have customized for the workplace, or for leadership, for agile, for retrospectives,
mm,
whatever they are. And so how this is the cusp of where I am, is how do I now hand this off to other people? So from being the chef to being the one who publishes the recipes, and
mm.
maybe supports other chefs in their kitchens.
I really love that metaphor, because that's indeed, that's the next level. If you can be a good chef in one restaurant, but then at some point you say, I want to open multiple restaurants, or I want to create a book and whatever, and then you have to realize, damn it, what do I all do? What needs to be in that recipe? And then you realize that when someone does it, that you say, yeah, but you forgot the salt, but it's not in the recipe. Yeah, of course, but you need to know that you always have to put salt. If I'm new as a new cook, I might not know. So that's a little bit. I really like that, because that is indeed part of the hard work of yeah, letting go and giving it to other people. That you need to realize the hard part, what is in your brain, and that you just do without thinking, and bringing that. So that even brings more depth to what you said earlier on about letting go. And
Exactly.
it's indeed, it's a hard part. So thanks for sharing that. Let's move to the next thing. What do you consider your biggest achievement so far?
Hmm.
And maybe
It was,
go to
yeah.
because you talked also about capitalism. I think that might be the sub question below might be important, about how easy is it for you? Because basically this is about bragging. You can brag about the most thing. How easy is it for you to brag about how the biggest achievement? Is that easy for you?
Oh, it's easy for me to say. I mean, if I wanted to brag, I could do a lot of name dropping of
Mm.
the companies that I've worked with.
And with the
Phone a
UN,
friend.
I assume that you have met lots of world leaders and whatever and all kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, if I were to name, if I were to brag, I mean, everything from Apple, Microsoft, Intuit, Federal Reserve Bank, United Nations, Visa. I mean, so I love that I have not only clients who are very influential in their industries and in their world. So I feel like that's my little piece of creating a better world, is creating these organizations that have so much influence on people's lives. And also working at the level of leadership that can make an influence. Because I
Wow.
hate to say it, but middle managers are really they're not my people as much, because they're often stuck with execution. How do I get things done?
Mhm.
And so I can tool them up. And that, don't get me wrong, I do speak at a lot of agile conferences, or have in the past, so that people at all levels can benefit from these tools. But my sweet spot is really people who really understand their influence and want to use it well. Those those
Mm.
are the types of leaders and teams that really we mesh very well. And so, but to answer your question very specifically, so that's the ego bragging. But I would say what my
Mm.
soul is most proud of, beyond the ego, beyond the name dropping and all that, it's I have really worked hard and worked well to road test and polish, road test and polish, and road test and polish these little nuggets of both nonviolent communication training, as well as certain common elements of offsites that clients tend to ask for a lot. That are, like I said, they're recipes that I've perfected in my test kitchen, and now it's time to share it with other chefs. So
Mm.
that's what I'm most proud of, is that I've taken nonviolent communication, which has traditionally been a very, very easy for people to dismiss in organizations, because it can be very intimate. It could be too intimate too fast, very easily.
Mm.
It could be, it could be very disconnecting to bring something that intense into the workplace. And so I found a way to bring nonviolent communication in ways that engineers, that leaders, that data scientists can say, ah, this is so helpful for what we do. And so making that connection and making the activities relevant to the workplace. So I'm really proud of that, of just taking this great body. It's standing on the shoulders of other nonviolent communication trainers and of Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of nonviolent, or the developer of nonviolent communication. But it's taking a lot of things that they've already developed, but customizing it for workplace applications in a way that people don't just roll their eyes and say, "Oh God," like, they get it in a way that they can get it. And I'm very proud of that, because that was
That
not
is
my genius. It was my tenacity. I would repeat that. That was not my genius. It was my tenacity to put something out there, get feedback, and make it better. Put it out there, get feedback, and make it better. And these are the little jewels that I've polished that I'm ready to share with the world.
and what I'm hearing also is that in a way that is, um, I would say, integrating nonviolent communication and agile in the say that you, because you practiced a lot of these things, you did it multiple times. That's one of the advantages, of course, in doing workshops with a lot of different kind of companies. You can basically do yeah, if the way you said it, retreats that are more or less retrospectives. Yeah, you can do that same kind of nugget somewhere else where it feels completely fresh, and then you can add a little bit to it, and you learn, and you say, oh, actually what worked in that company didn't work here, and it might be for some strange reason, because in the afternoon that doesn't work in this kind of way, or whatever happening. But you can actually, what I'm hearing is you did it so many times that you can actually figure it out why some of the things are working and not working, or at least
Yeah.
understand.
Well, less figuring out and more listening.
Mm,
So putting something out there and seeing what lands. And then, and this is why, when someone invites me to, I use conferences for this a lot. I'll test new material, just like a comedian, who tests new material at the smaller clubs, right? I'll test new material in conferences and get lots of feedback on that. And then if it's a company that, let's say a smaller business that doesn't have, the same budget, or a nonprofit, I'll again test more things with them that would be, so it's, yeah, it's an act of polishing that,
but I
it's
like
less
that you
figuring out, more hearing their comments and improving.
yeah,
Go ahead.
that's what I'm hearing. It's about the listening to what people do with it, or what they that's a little bit what I heard also. I really like that you stress that it's the listening part, because it's not just you sitting in a little chair thinking about it. No, no, no. It's the
Yeah.
feedback that you got. It's listening to what's happening in a workshop, because workshop facilitating, I once had to remark that if you were just sitting in the corner and we were doing the work, yeah, but that doesn't mean I wasn't paying attention. I was really paying attention, and in that corner I could see everyone. If I would walk around, which some other facilitators would do, I would miss a lot of other stuff. So there was a reason why I was in that corner, because I knew I could see everybody. And that's also a little bit about designing not just a workshop, but also where will I sit, where will I observe people, and listen to the room in a way. That's
Absolutely. And part of that too is learning how to ask good questions, or effective
mm,
questions. So when I was a younger facilitator, I spent so much unnecessary energy on trying to prove the value of this, right? Here's how you might
mm.
apply this. Here's what's valuable about this. And I realized I got it all wrong. It's why I learned in coaching school, if you're working harder than your clients, there's something wrong, right?
Oh, that is such a good statement. Yes,
Right? If you're working
it's
harder than clients, there's something wrong. And so, I was spending all this unnecessary energy as a baby facilitator. It's like, well, this is why this is so valuable to you. And here's how you might apply this. And it's like, forget that. Now, the easy part and the valuable part, where I get the diamonds from them, right, is what did you find, instead of me telling you, I'll ask you, what did you find valuable about this? Right? Or I
Mm.
might say, here's a few applications. What other applications do you see in your workplace? And they'll come up with stuff that I would have never thought of. So
Or
just
you
that
don't
art.
know their environment, and you can't know.
Exactly, exactly. And even if I think I know their environment, it's to
They
assume
wouldn't
that I'm the
listen to
smartest
you.
person in the room is wrong, right? You wanna tap, and this is part of the joy of, I want to bring my recipes out there, because not only do I know they'll be delicious and help people in lots of ways, they'll create a more empathetic world, but just like every good chef, there's other good chefs out there and they're going to improve those recipes. So I would love to see how people run with these ideas and even improve them in their own ways.
Yeah, I really like, especially when you say about when you ask them about what's good about it. What I've noticed, and you talked about giving training and talking at conferences. What I've noticed is that if I talk about whatever agile practice or whatever facilitation technique, if I immediately talk about how I use it at a certain company, the very first reaction, the very human reaction of people is, "Why am I different? Why doesn't it work for me?" And
That's
I've
nice.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, and it doesn't help because then it's in a yes no, and then it's me trying to convince that it's working. I try to get out of that. So these days I love to tell the same stories, the same examples, but from my personal life, and I tell them right in the start, in the beginning, like, this is personal stuff from personal things, and I consider you as an adult smart enough to translate it to where it will work in your thing, and then your brain is activated to actually think, hey, where can I apply it? And that's a little bit the same thing as where you say, how could you use it, what's valuable for you? It's not about, okay, because all techniques, everything, there's things that won't work, and that's true, it's very easy for people to find lots of ways, but okay, how can we activate these people's brains on where does it actually work? Find ways, and asking questions, and it's not about you thinking, I am so smart that I came up with the right thing. And that's what you said earlier on. This is about the ego. And then, okay, I can tell to whatever big name that, hey, this is a way that it will improve your life. But the more I do that, the less this kind of person will listen to me. And it's actually the opposite. I ask that, and yeah, in many cases, well, I don't know how it's for you, but I like to work with people who are way smarter than me, and so they will tell me what they will do, and I'll learn much more, and that's really, and they will love me for it because they will actually have improved their life. But sometimes it's, I would even, and it might sound negative, but sometimes a lot of what we do is giving them opportunity to think, giving them a place to think and to improve their life with some of the tools. But the fact that I'm there is just giving them time to think, because otherwise they would be busy doing other stuff. Is that something you
Exactly.
recognize as well?
Um, yes. What comes to mind is, I think about a plant, right? If you shine light on something, it's going to grow. And
Mm,
so, if an organization takes the time and the money, two very valuable assets of their people, and say, we're going to come together around whatever it is, whether it's about, we have a merger acquisition and we want to unite our cultures, whether we have an employee survey and we got some bad news and we want to do something about it, whether it's just an annual retrospective, or whether we've been working remotely for so many months, it's time we actually look at each other in the eye, face to face, whatever the reason. Whenever you shine a light on that, and so when clients are nervous or they express like, I don't know, I'll say it's going to be a success no matter what, because if people come together with a, a strong purpose, a solid reason for coming together, then even a mediocre facilitator, I'm not saying I'm mediocre, but like even a mediocre facilitator, you will have a great experience because you're coming together for something wonderful.
mm,
Right? Your time may not be as effective, but a great facilitator cannot save an event from being a failure if people show up and they don't want to be there, or
mm.
there's not a strong or good reason. So, and this is true for a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion training. I will turn down, like a lot of people ask me to do like inclusive communication skills. And nonviolent communication is great at that. And yet I'm very clear. if you force people to come to these kinds of things, you're already creating sort of a victim mentality where I'm doing this because I have to. They're coming from a place of compliance and submission. And those will eventually sprout through the surface as rebellion, passive aggressive behavior, shutdown, snarkiness. So if people don't want to be there, it's just going to be a poison. And yet, if you have a great reason and people want to be there, so a great facilitator, a master facilitator, cannot save a group that is there for not great reasons. And yet a mediocre facilitator can still pull off, facilitate a great experience if everyone's there for a wonderful reason. So that's a lot of words. I don't know if that's
but I think maybe it was not exactly on that exact same question, but you said so much important things there. And sometimes indeed, like what you say, rejecting a certain thing to do might actually be the thing that client needs, and then the next time they will do a better offer, and they will say, okay, or maybe, and that I hope that happened to you. It definitely happened to me when I said, in this circumstances, I say no. And then it's actually a start of a negotiation or a start of a conversation when they say, okay, but we still want you. Okay, then let's design it to actually a great thing. And let's not force people and whatever. And yeah, it is a lot of work on some of these things, and then maybe the next time might be better, or maybe it's so there's a lot of, I would say it's also your responsibility. Again, you talked very clearly in the beginning about doing the stuff that is close to your heart and that you feel that that is correct. That also means sometimes, or in a lot of times, I would say, saying no to things that you feel something is off, even if I don't know how it is for you, but for me, sometimes it's like I have a gut feeling that says no. I can't explain it, and then I say, "Oh, sorry, but no. This is. I might not be the right person here to do that." Is that something? Do you have that gut feeling a lot? Yeah, that's what a lot is maybe exaggerated.
And absolutely. And the most common scenario for that is in the initial consultation when they say, we want a workshop on communication skills. It's like, okay, so why do you want the workshop, right? The first thing I'm listening to is not, how do I design a workshop for you? I'm listening to, and I'll tell the clients, it's not a secret. I said, I'm listening to see whether training is really going to address your issue. Mm-hmm. This may not be a training issue. It could be a process issue. So that I'd say less. It's very rare that I ever get that feeling like there's something off here, and if so, I'll usually go into an inquiry if I do. Most of the time, if it's a no, it's because this is not a training issue. This is, we need to look at your work processes, or we need to look at your reward systems, and maybe I can help you with that, or maybe there's someone else who might be better, depending on the issue.
That's the better.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. It
seems like you had a question earlier that maybe I misunderstood. Was there a question that I didn't?
No. It's. I'm not sure how much it was, but I really think that your answers typically ask a question to find more details, and we definitely had that. I wanted what I heard you say also now was that it's maybe not really saying no, but it's more saying, okay, what else do you need? And that's indeed the question I had more about. That gut feeling might tell you this is not the right answer. That doesn't always mean I have to say no. It might be, okay, I have a better solution for you. But it's still the no to the initial question, but it's a diversion to a better answer, which hopefully the clients listen to. If they say, no, it still want the workshop and it should be designed that way, maybe then you will say, that's not me, or talk to that other person. That's very, very, I really like that, how you explain it also, that initial conversation. And I think this is so agile. It's about that initial contact. It's about making sure that we have that that open communication about what the client thinks he or she wants and what they actually need, because that's not always that's to bring music again. And actually, I said something similar in a different podcast that I recorded this week. This is about the Rolling Stones song about you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need, and that's exactly what you were talking about. Um,
Yeah.
that thing. Okay, let's move to that next one. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Absolutely. And this is about practicing what I preach. It's so
Mm.
I'm going to say this not to you. I'm going to say this to me, which is to remember to go ugly early, and in doing so, to exchange perfection for progress.
Do
Go
you
ugly early.
what the ugly I understand, but what do you mean with the perfection in progress? Could you say some more, because I'm
Yeah.
not sure I understand it.
By going ugly early, I'm letting go of the need for perfection so that I can have more progress.
So
So,
the
for
perfection
example,
is really that end goal, and the ugly thing is like, let's in software would be, let's create that very first version. It doesn't matter if it's good, whatever. Let's get it out the door. Let's get feedback, and then even feedback from yourself, because that's what I'm hearing, is that you yourself, you're sometimes, I don't know how to put it, so hard on yourself that you want that first version to be perfect before you want to show it to the world. Is that
exactly.
what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Whether it's the website that has been on a holding pattern for months, waiting for the last 20%, right? Whether it's hiring someone for search engine optimization, whether it's hiring a personal assistant, whether it's finding a graphic artist to work with, you know, do I need to research every possible person in the world? Do I need to vet them? Do I need to, interview everyone, or could I just, you know, find someone easy, give it a try, and see how it goes? So
And you do know the answer to that, but yeah, it's hard to
yeah,
fully understand or fully yeah, do it with that the right thing, because yeah, talking to
exactly.
everybody in the world, it's technically impossible. But yeah, it's so hard because yeah, there is always someone. I actually had a similar kind of discussion with that was in a very similar way. I want to hire someone for a certain position, and one of our reactions that we had after the interview is that we had the feeling this person is too perfect. And I realized in that discussions, it's like, no, this, if we actually are happy about what that is, it could be that this person is bullshitting us and showing us a nicer world. That could be. But if we really think that person is perfect, is too perfect, then we should just do it, because that's, and I was so I in that conversation, I was like, how the hell could we even think? Because it's not, we know it's not true. Of course, nobody is perfect for the job. There's always some little thing. So why do we then start to hesitate at the moment that it feels like this is so good that we would not even do that? And I was so like, that was like that next version of where you are. It's like, okay, we're talking at good people, and at some point we finally have someone that is really so good that we even start to doubt, is that even possible? It's like, okay, yeah, and so
Yes.
at some point you have to let go and say, indeed, take it on, let's give it a try, and indeed within that context, find the context where we can trust this person to see how things are going, and take that next step. So thank you for
And I'm
sharing
smiling.
that. Go
Thank you.
ahead.
And I'm smiling because I'm hearing this not only as business advice, but maybe even dating advice.
Wow. That's the next level, of course. That's the next
Yeah.
level. But that's yeah. But I recognize as well. I've been happy married for a long time, so I'm not on the market. But I hear that also. Indeed, I've seen it also with friends of mine at a certain point. That so yeah, and at when a relationship is broken, that people then doubt about that next. Yeah, but that's like, yeah. And it's also the same thing. You have to jump into a relationship and try it out, and you will learn to live with some of the things. And of course, I'm not talking about working or having a relationship with toxic people, but at some point with everybody, there will be some glitches. And that's the thing, is what parts can we live with and what parts can't we live with. And it's not about accepting everybody, but it's about finding that a person that makes your life better at this moment for this part. And that is also, yeah, so your personal tip that you gave for yourself, you can actually apply it at multiple levels. That's personal at the in the personal agility tip at yet another level, I would say. Let's but let's move on to that remote working. You talked about earlier about doing remote trainings and doing a lot of that stuff. What have you learned about remote working that you want to share with the world?
Yeah, and again, it's a philosophy of use technology for what technology is good for. Use human interaction for what human interaction is good for. And so, remote technology can actually allow me to do some things in terms of training, workshops, conversations that we might not be able to do even in person. And this is beyond just time zones, for example. We could have, instant breakouts, or we can have people turn their cameras off. Like, for example,
Mm.
I could do an activity to say, okay, everyone turn your camera off. And now you have complete privacy. Think about the current situation at work that's bringing you down, and stand up and form a human statue in that embodies how you feel about this situation. Right. And so now no one's looking. And now some people might be in a fetal position on the floor, and some people might just be drooping. And I'll say, put in the chat if you like, describe what your position is. Boom. Right. And then we'll go through some nonviolent communication activities where they can access their power, go into the Ilanguage, connect with the deeper needs. What's important to you about this, right? Stand in what's important to you instead of what's wrong with them or what's wrong with the situation. What's important to me, and standing in the power of that. And I can say, cameras off, and now form a human statue. When you're standing connected to this greater need of yours, what what body position do you have? And some people will say, I'm standing like a superhero, and my head's up, or so that's something where you can use technology that you couldn't do in person, where you have a level of privacy with cameras off.
I,
And
I
I've done this.
really love that, because most of the time when we talk about remote, one of the tips is let's put more cameras on and let's better equipment and whatever. And you're actually doing the opposite for creating actually a better connection. And I so much love that, because it's indeed, we sometimes, so many people focus on what is taken away when we go remotely, but we should look out for what is added. The fact I
Yeah,
can get some privacy, the fact that I can do some stuff, the fact that it's like, okay, and like you say, I can sit on the floor and I can actually feel it completely, and then go back to the connection. The fact that
exactly.
there are some of that stuff, and it's making sure that we are, yeah, one way or another, that, oh, I so like that, because usually it goes back to, yeah, and then you have people asking, "Well, how can I force everybody to put on cameras?" And it's like, not sure if that would help. And we can find all kind of tricks to make you turn on your camera. But actually, your tip is about, okay, what advantage do we have? Let's now all turn off your cameras and let's all see what it means. And it might be actually very confronting for some people to not be seeing in a meeting, because we talked about making sure that people hear me, people, how could I take presence in a meeting? And some people might find it very disturbing to not being seen in the meeting, so that might actually bring other kind of emotions.
Yeah. So, and again, it's just creating, using what it's good at, but then also creating safety. So,
Mm.
personally, I prefer in person to online. I prefer cameras on to cameras off. And yet, as a facilitator, how do you optimize your tool? It's like, oh, if we're in person, how do we optimize, you know, uh, if sometimes I'll veto things if a client wants to do something at an offsite. It's like, well, you know what, is this something you could do online? If you only have 1, 2, or 3 days together, let's use that time to do things that you cannot do on Teams or Zoom. What is unique about this ability to actually be physically present with each other? And what is unique about, Teams or Zoom? So I think this is part of our challenge, or our creativity challenge, is, how do we optimize the experience to the tool?
I so like that, and indeed bringing back the yeah, use the tools for what they are, and also the physical, the tool of being physical together, because that's a tool like we don't always see it. We take it for granted and we think this is the normal thing. Well, wait a minute, it has disadvantages. Let's use the advantage part, and let's make yeah.
Exactly.
When do we need it? Because it also means that if you're physically together, that you're synchron in ways, and how could we work asynchron in different kind of things? For a lot of workshops that's almost impossible, but still there are ways that we can say, okay, for example, I have someone here talked about the advantage if I do a physical workshop, it's 2-3 days in a row because I'm there and I need to fly in or whatever. If I do it remotely, I can actually spread it out over 3 weeks, so I can do one here and then just take half a day, and then people have time to think about it, and the next week or whatever. That's something that we would never do physically, because I would need to fly 3 times to that location, or I need to be very close in your location. So that's different kind of thing. Where do we see advantages for? And I like it so much that you say, okay, maybe then we're there, so do stuff that we together. We can eat together, because remote, okay, we can do on camera eating, but that not really working, so let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people turn off their cameras while they're eating, because it's like, I don't want people to look at my face while I'm
Exactly. And
eating.
if we're face to exactly. And if we're face and face, not only could we share a meal, but I like to build in walk and talks. So, part of
Mm.
the DJ experience, right? We're going to do things all as a group, but you want to respect the introverts or the people who are more private. So let's also do something where you pair up with a partner and you can interview each other, or have a walk and talk around something, and then come back and share your results. So, being in person. So with Zoom or Teams, yeah, we have the camera on and off and a lot of other nice features, polling, etc. But in person, we could do activities in the sunshine together, be outdoors.
Mm.
We can walk. We can go for walks together. We can make music together. I mean, music was a huge part of the last offsite I did. And these are all software engineers, so there are things that you can do in person that are just beautiful. And again, optimizing the the platform for what it's good at. Making music is great in person. And we even had in the offsite that we did before, we had them do a songwriting challenge where volunteers offered to write lyrics to Yellow Submarine, because they had a conference room that was yellow, and or a room that they worked in that was yellow, and they nicknamed it the Yellow Submarine. So our closing song at the end of their offsite is some volunteers wrote lyrics to Yellow Submarine, and then they posted it, and everyone sang it at the end. So these kinds of little creativity challenges, singing together, for me, they're just priceless. And that's what being in person is really good at. Not as easy on Zoom.
Yeah, we had some. I know some professional musicians that try to record things over the internet during COVID when they were all in lockdown. It's not that it's impossible, but it creates a lot of different challenges, and you need to rethink again how you work, and different kind of things. So that's so if you're not a professional musician, that's even harder to do all that kind of things. So definitely, but I really like how you stress how you should use both of them for their strengths, and think about that. Okay, I want to move to that next thing, and I'm kind of predict already a little bit where you want to go. But what's a book that you have read that you want to talk about?
It would definitely be the classic Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life by Dr. Marshall
This
Rosenberg.
one.
There you go. Yeah.
And there's, I only took one cover, but I think there's like 4 or 5 different covers that I found when I was, because that book is, like you say, it's been a classic. It's been out for quite a while. Uh, and yeah, there's other people who wrote a little bit about it, but this book has so much, there's so much into that. So, if people, why would they need to read this particular book about nonviolent
Mm.
communication? What do you find so important about that one?
Thank you. As a starting point, I value that it is the words of the creator. This is the person who
Mm.
created nonviolent communication, and that it's a thin book. And I like little books, so it's little but packed with flavor. So it's
Mm.
it's an easy read, and yet it will take a lifetime to practice.
To learn it and to practice it. I really like that because it's indeed, I'm not sure if he said it on the show, but one of the people I've interviewed, also Alistair Coburn, I remember that he once said to me that every book is there's only need to be 1/3 of the book because there's 2/3 of the book, and including his own books, he says editors want you to add so much other stuff, and really there is always a little part that is in there, and but it's a nice example. That's indeed a smaller book. It's not like. Yeah, if I compare it to a few other things about how to work with people and everything, a lot of the other books are really thick. Um, Theory U comes to mind. That's really an important big thing. And if you compare it to nonviolent communication, that's actually a lot smaller thing to learn and to. But at the same time, um, you need to read it multiple times. You need to have it. I was looking around. I don't see it lying on my desk at this moment, but I know that for a long time it was on my desk because there's so much in between meetings because this is for me about practicing finding the right languages, and then it can be helpful to read it again and I don't consider myself a trainer or anything, an expert in nonviolent communication, but just reading it brought so much ideas with me and so much how would I say it? There is so much finesse and so much things in how we can ask questions and how we talk with people, and I really like that you bring that up. That it's an older book, and we've been talking already so much about, or you've been talking so much about nonviolent communication. It could have been very easy to talk about another book and consider that okay, that's done already. But I really like that you want to stress that this is the start. As a facilitator, as a trainer, for me, I really like to go always back to the originators of things, of people done it, because you learn so much from the masters. You learn so much about that core. And of course, as a trainer, it's interesting because I can never be that same person as the original person. So in a way, I'm talking against my own thing because I'm telling them go there. But especially for me as a trainer, I find it so important that if I want to talk and teach people other stuff, that I learn it so much more from the original source. And I think that's what I recognize with you as well. So you talk about a lifetime. Did you when you read that book, how do you work with a book like that? Do you read it cover to cover? Do you read how do you work with such a book?
Well, I'm laughing because I'm actually not much of a reader, and the fact that it's a small book is what attracted me. So, and 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 for me, the way the book worked for me um, is I would just read just the tiniest little bit, maybe one page, pages, and then try to put it into practice. And then read a little more, try to put it into practice. It's uh, there's 4 elements of nonviolent communication. I mean, you could just work on one element and give yourself a month. And so for me, that's how I
Mm,
noticed it. I first made the mistake of trying to learn it all at once. I took a workshop and realized that this is something valuable that I want to learn, but I don't understand it because I tried to do it all at once. Kind of like a martial art, right? A martial art is so much more than just punching and kicking. And on the surface it could look like that. But it's everything. It's how you breathe, it's how you think. It's how you stand. It's your feet. There are so many moving parts and awareness. And so it is with nonviolent communication. So simple. And yet even just one of the four elements can take a lifetime of practice. Like something as simple as observations versus judgments,
Mm.
right? Saying I didn't like that my food was cold at that restaurant, or I don't like the food there, versus that's a terrible restaurant, or that jerk cut me off on the freeway, versus oh that car entered my lane and I had to hit the brakes, and now I'm feeling angry because I felt I was in danger for a second. So those little, even one of those elements can you can practice and practice and practice. And that's what I like,
Yeah,
taking a look at. Yeah.
the observations about facts and about everything that I think I've learned that years ago before even nonviolent communication. I'm not sure if that was inspired by nonviolent communication, but I remember a workshop where the question we just got, I don't know, everybody got like two or three black and white pictures, and we had to talk what we saw, and everybody just we didn't talk about facts and observations. We talked about things. This person is angry. No, you see a face that has a certain expression. I I think he's angry, but I don't know. I just see something, and I might even, if it was black and white, and so I saw shadows. That means I couldn't even see if it was a man or a woman or whatever what that clothes that the people were wearing. But that already I was assuming certain things. I remember one person being so sure that that person was wearing jeans, where you could actually not even see that kind of thing. So there was really interesting. And so just having indeed learning to work with facts and observations, and okay, what is it? Feelings that, yeah, it's there is a difference between being angry and what are the needs that I have, and how these the interactions between these things. And then, yeah, that for me, that last part, I might have a need, but if I don't know how to tell it to people what I really want, then then that doesn't make a difference. So all that kind of thing. So I really like that you say that, okay, it was small, I read it completely, or I tried to use it completely, and then we realized, no, this is not working. I need to work in small chunks. And it's a nice example of a book where that works. I think that's also important, that I assume that he worked really hard on creating such a thing, because typically a smaller book is a lot harder to write than a bigger book, and not just a smaller book, but also a book that is possible to read in chunks, because very easy, you need to read everything, and then you can practice that part, and you can learn something, and then you can go to the next step. So that kind of thing. And yeah, I see it in so much other things that you're discussing about, yeah, your empathy for the world. I assume also your empathy for yourself, because in some of the things that you're discussing. So it's I would say, I don't remember anymore when I originally read that book, but it has had a lot of impact on me and a lot of the people that I know that have read it. So thank you for bringing that up, because sometimes you forget about talking about, I would say, older books, and then people talk about the new shiny new book, and we think about that, but some of the classics stay important as well. So
It's
thank you for
timeless.
bringing that up. I want to move to, for me, one of the most interesting questions is that, what's a question do you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
Ah. Yeah. Uh, the question I would love to be asked is about the future. What do I see?
Mm.
Would you like to ask that?
Yes.
Or
So
just let me jump in?
what do you see in the future? What's well, is it your future, or is it the future of the world? What particular do you want to talk about?
The interface of both.
Mm.
And I'll make it short because in a lot of ways I've already touched on it, which is it's time for me to stop kind of being selfish and just saying, this is my little body of work, and this is what I'm using in my world and in the people who know me, right? And it's time to say, wow, I really have things that could be shared and can make, can help people in the world beyond just the people who know me or hire me. And so that's what I see as the future, is putting this stuff out there at a time that the world really needs ways to hear each other, ways to speak to each other. Already, I have so many ideas of, mental health in fraternities, sororities, and dormitories, in dialogue on university campuses between Israeli and Palestinian students. I mean, I have things right now that could bring people together in safe and mindful conversation, that make it easy without resorting to, blame and violence. So like, how do I, so that's the future, is this little precious thing that I've been polishing and holding is finally out in the world doing good at a time when the world really needs it.
And when you talk about that future, how far in the future is that future?
Oh,
I'm talking from actually a few hours in your future. So is that by the time you're at my time zone that it's already there, or is that you're talking about weeks or months? What's your time zone for that future, or what's your time frame
it's
for that future?
Yeah, there's little milestones. The first
Mm.
milestone is, by January 2024, the activity that I was referring to that can help, student mental health, that could help conversations on university campuses of people who would be otherwise yelling at each other or protesting, deep these types of deep conflict. There's a whole set of what I call empathy poker cards that I've developed for organizational applications, with a bunch of facilitator instructions for all kinds of scenarios, from conflict to, risk taking, to just team building and general connection. And so I want to get that out first because that's easy. It's so easy for people to use. And I didn't invent it. I just adapted it for organizational settings. So and it's really good. I mean, it can really, but it's something that can do a lot of good in the hands of other people, and I need to get it out of my hands. So
So
that's
that's an interesting thing to hear, because I don't know the exact time frame of when this video will come out, but I do know that I have, for once, I'm a little bit ahead of schedule. So by the time this video will come out, probably your cards will be there. So if that's the case, I'll definitely add the link to the show notes and to the when we talk about it, so that people can actually find it in a way to buy it, or to find it in ways to consume it, or whatever that is. I'm just already thinking, oh, I have a workshop at the end of February, at the end of January, where I can really use these kind of things. So that's another thing. I'm already like looking forward for that future. So I'm really looking forward to that. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for creating these little nuggets and sharing it, because like you say, it's really good that you've had that experience and that you let it grow, and at the same time it's a shame that it's not word in the world where more people can use it. And I think that's a little bit that balance in agile also. It's like you need to work on yourself, you need to improve it. So putting it out too early is also not good, but at some point it's like, okay, this is now good enough to have a very first version out. And I'm sure a year later there will be some improvements and multiple kind of things. Maybe there is translations in all kind of languages and all kind of stuff, but that's something for the future. Let's first create that very first version.
absolutely. Thank you.
So I want to move to that last question about who do you think I should ask next?
Definitely William Adams. And he is relatively
That's
unknown in the
him, if I'm correct.
There he is, yes. Um, he has worked with Microsoft for, I think, 26 or so years, maybe more than
Wow.
that. And radically, as an engineering manager, not in HR, but radically influenced HR policies to be more inclusive in Microsoft, and not just in terms of hiring and recruitment, but also things like, hey, why don't we open up an engineering office in Africa? Think of all of
Mm.
the talent, all of the creativity that's out there that we're not tapping into, that could not only diversify the workforce, but bring a whole new continent of genius to Microsoft's ranks. So he stands for something that I think the Agile community would love. And he calls it tequity. And tequity is basically
Mm.
equity in tech. And he's got a lot of really not only beautiful things to say about that, but some great ideas.
And not just great ideas, what I'm hearing is he actually implemented them and used them inside Microsoft, which is one of the largest organizations we have in tech. So it's not just small ideas, it's not just something working and yeah, a small thing. No, no, this is actually because transforming and bringing HR policies to such a large organization is not something easy to do. I mean, this is an organization that's been existing for many, many years. So if you do that work and you actually can make influence on that kind of level, then it's not just ideas, then it's really like going into the trenches yourself and working out to, because that's more than just having ideas, I would say.
Exactly. And he is no longer with Microsoft. He recently left after a very long and
Hmm.
great career there, so that he can spend the rest of his life on his mission for tequity, for technical equity. So bringing more access to underrepresented groups into technology, and not just, oh, I'm so glad I have a job at Microsoft, but hey, I created some intellectual property, and maybe now I can actually sell it or build a business around it. One of the things that inspired my recommendation of William was we had a conversation over a year ago where he was sort of lamenting to me, and he was saying, Lorraine, in my time at Microsoft, I've created a number of millionaires because we're looking for certain technology for our platform, and we see some startup, and we'll just buy that. We'll buy their technology, right? So boom, you're a millionaire. We're using your technology. We bought your company, and the lament is, can you guess what gender they are? Can you
Hmm.
guess? Can you guess what color their skin is?
Exactly.
Can you guess what age they are? Can you guess what part of the world they're from? So this is what we mean by technical equity. There's nothing wrong with, oh, wonderful, you had a great idea, you sold it, and you're doing well. But there are great ideas that can come from all over the world. And
And why are we only buying the ones from the white male? Exactly, because that's that's the guess I'm making now.
yeah,
But that
there's
there is
nothing wrong with that. But how do we widen it, right?
exactly. So well, and it means also finding out the good ideas in the rest of the world, and like you say, opening an office in Africa to make sure that we can tap into the world and find the entrepreneurs that are there that having good ideas. Because I'm pretty sure that there will also be good ideas that are solving maybe problems in that part of the world that it also would be good if Microsoft would invest in that, because it would help part of that world independent of the billionaires and the millionaires, but also about solving software problems in that part of the world, because that is a different kind of software problem than we have in other parts of the world sometimes.
Exactly. And not only software problems, but even things they're doing a lot with agriculture that have helped a lot of
Mm.
small farmers. So by using just like your mobile phone, for example, being able to take a photograph of your crops and send that to an app that Microsoft can even make available free to many people. And then boom, having the analysis of what nutrients your crops need, so that you don't have to buy all the fertilizer. You can only buy what you need, for example. And he'll be better at answering these questions, but they've done a lot to improve the lives of small farmers in Africa. And it's really breathtaking.
And I really like that, using the technology, because indeed, if people have to go somewhere for advice, and yeah, maybe the people who typically give it advice to farmers in the US, and now these people also have a larger market in places that will probably need more help because there is the environment might be a little bit rougher for some things, might be better for others because it might
Yeah.
be more sun and other things. So that's really a powerful thing to talk about. So thank you for bringing William on the show. I'll hope he will accept. I'll definitely invite him and see where we can move forward for that. So thank you very much. Now it's been a wonderful conversation, a little bit over 2 hours because we went depending on when we started recording. It might be just a little under 2 hours. Um, when people want to contact you, what could be a good way of contacting you?
Definitely my website, which is workingharmony.com.
And that should be the one, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been, like you said, I said 2 hours and you're like, what? So that's the same thing. I had to look up the time to realize it. And it really shows that, yes, we've been talking for a very long time, but it felt like this was so natural conversation. We went very deep in lots of different things. I've learned a lot. It's been a fun moment to have that conversation. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Eve. And I enjoyed getting to know you as well. It seems like we have a lot in common.
I have that same feeling. So I hope one day when we're a little bit less remote, when I would go to conferences, that we might run into each other. But until then, I would say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.